Have you ever felt like the whole world is quietly judging you? Not with words, not with loud accusations, but with those fleeting looks that linger just a moment too long? The kind of look that reduces you to nothing more than a label or a stereotype. What if that judgment came because of something you had to fight for? Something you lost in the service of your country? It was 5:30 in the morning at Jackson International Airport in Mississippi, and the terminal was just beginning to stir. The usual cacophony of rolling suitcases, chatter, and boarding announcements had yet to reach its full volume. Instead, there was a soft murmur of distant voices, the faint hum of the cleaning crews wrapping up, and the first cautious footsteps of early travelers. Among them was Marcus L. Hayes. Marcus moved steadily through the quiet terminal, his pace measured and deliberate. At 6'2", with broad shoulders and a presence that spoke of quiet authority, he stood out even in the subdued morning light. But it was the sound beneath his left step, a soft, mechanical click, that drew the unspoken attention of those around him. The carbon fiber prosthetic leg gleamed with a matte black finish, built for durability and function rather than style. It was more than a piece of equipment. It was a testament to survival, sacrifice, and resilience. Marcus wasn't just walking through an airport. He was carrying the weight of memories too heavy to put into words. His canvas military duffel bag, frayed at the edges and stitched with faded olive green thread, hung heavily from his shoulder. It was the same bag that had traveled with him through 3 deployments overseas, bearing silent witness to battles fought, wounds endured, and brothers lost. At the Delta Airlines check-in counter, a young woman with fiery red hair and tired eyes greeted him. Her smile was polite, but rehearsed as if she had said the same words 1,000 times before. "Good morning, sir. Flying solo today?" she asked, her tone more habitual than curious. Marcus nodded slowly, sliding his military ID across the counter. "Yes, ma'am," he replied with a steady voice, practiced in the art of respect and brevity. The agent glanced down at his ID, then up to him again. Her eyes flickered briefly to the crease of his pant leg, where the prosthetic was just visible. It was a brief hesitation, barely a second, but Marcus caught the flicker of something in her gaze. Not pity, not admiration, something less kind. "Thank you for your service," she said quickly, handing back his ID with a slight awkwardness in her smile. Marcus offered a small nod of thanks and moved on. He didn't need words here. He'd heard those sentiments before, from strangers, from friends, from the silence of hospital rooms in the dusty roads of foreign lands. They were polite, they were expected, and sometimes they felt hollow. Making his way toward TSA security, Marcus felt the cool chill of the early morning air conditioning seep through his worn jacket. The announcements over the loudspeaker crackled softly. "Flight 409 to Dallas boarding soon at Gate B12, followed by a similar call for Phoenix." He joined the growing queue of travelers, businessmen in pressed suits, families with young children, and hurried commuters. Around him, the steady hum of movement blended with the occasional cry of a toddler or the murmur of a phone conversation. Marcus was a calm island in this sea of motion, but he was anything but invisible. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed the familiar glances, furtive, hesitant, and often tinged with discomfort. People who couldn't quite reconcile the image of a strong, tall man with the mechanical limb that gave him his stride. Some would look away quickly, guilt shadowing their expressions. Others would stare just a little too long, their eyes betraying a mix of curiosity and unease. A few, less kind, would smirk or whisper behind cupped hands, confident in their judgment. Marcus didn't care for their stares. He had faced worse in places where bullets and bombs were the only language spoken. What troubled him more were the whispers, the quiet, venomous murmurs from those who saw him as less than, as broken, as a punchline. Adjusting the strap of his bag, he stepped forward, his prosthetic clicking rhythmically on the tiled floor. The familiar sound was both a comfort and a reminder of battles past and battles still to come. At the security checkpoint stood Agent Corbin, a young man with pale skin marked by a faded scar running across his cheekbone, a permanent souvenir from some forgotten scuffle. Corbin's expression was a mixture of arrogance and boredom, the kind of look Marcus had seen far too many times. It was a look that demanded power without responsibility, authority without respect. "Step up, old man," Corbin barked without even glancing in Marcus's direction. Marcus responded with calm professionalism, placing his bag on the conveyor belt and stepping through the metal detector. The alarm blared instantly. Corbin smirked, the sound of his laugh loud and mocking. "Again, old-timer," he said, clearly enjoying the moment far more than he should. Marcus didn't rise to the bait. He walked back through the scanner, steady and unshaken. The alarm sounded again. "Looks like we got ourselves a robot leg here," Corbin announced, his voice loud enough for the waiting travelers to hear. The laughter that followed was juvenile, but sharp. Heads turned. Some passengers looked confused. Others averted their eyes quickly. No one joined in the laughter. Marcus stood firm, voice steady as he said, "Combat injury, Kandahar, 2007. Corbin shrugged lazily, tapping his radio. "Need a supervisor at lane 3. Vet with a hot leg." A ripple of whispers passed through the crowd, some skeptical, others sympathetic. Marcus caught the glance of a teenage girl clutching her mother's sleeve and an older man frowning at him with what looked like regret, but no one stepped forward. Marcus didn't need their defense. He had fought wars far harsher than this quiet moment of humiliation. His fight was not for protection, but for dignity. And that was something that no one handed out lightly. The air in the security lane thickened with tension, heavy and suffocating. Marcus felt it like a physical weight pressing down on his chest, heavier than any pack he had carried in Afghanistan. It wasn't the metal detectors, the alarms, or the endless routine of airport security that got to him. It was the invisible battlefield of attitudes and assumptions. Corbin, standing with a cocky grin and crossed arms, acted as if this was some kind of twisted performance. The young agent clearly relished the attention, the small power trip of being able to hold someone, a veteran no less, in check. Marcus was used to such games. He had faced harsh scrutiny before, in military bases, in hospitals, even in the quiet moments when no one else was looking. But never before had he felt quite so exposed and belittled in a place that was supposed to be safe, mundane, normal. "Sir, please step aside for additional screening," Corbin said with mock solemnity. Marcus complied, not out of submission but with the quiet resolve of a man who understood the rules of the game, even if those rules were unfair. Behind the faded blue curtain of the secondary screening area, Marcus stood still, feeling the faint hum of fluorescent lights overhead and the sterile chill of the room seep into his bones. He watched as Corbin called for the handheld scanner and gloves, clearly eager to prolong the ordeal. "Let's see what this robot leg of yours is made of," Corbin sneered, voice dripping with sarcasm. Marcus didn't respond. His eyes remained steady, fixed on a distant memory rather than the man before him. He remembered the blast, the deafening roar that tore through the desert night, the sharp burning pain that followed, and the silence that swallowed everything afterward. The smell of scorched earth and burnt fabric, the screams and orders and the overwhelming weight of helplessness. He had lost more than a leg that night. He had lost pieces of himself, fragments of a life that would never be whole again. But here, in this cold airport room, none of that mattered to Corbin. To him, Marcus was a punchline, an easy target for cheap laughs and misplaced bravado. The handheld scanner beeped sharply as it passed over the carbon limb, and Corbin smirked triumphantly. "See? Nothing to hide after all, just a fancy prosthetic." Marcus felt a flicker of anger, but it was tempered by years of discipline. He had learned long ago that anger rarely won battles. Patience and dignity did. A woman stepped into the room. She moved with the confident professionalism of someone who had dealt with more than her share of childish antics. Her badge read, "Budrow." Unlike Corbin, she did not wear arrogance like armor. Instead, her eyes held something softer. Understanding, perhaps, or simply the wisdom of experience. "Enough," she said firmly, but without hostility. "Let's finish this quickly." Marcus nodded, grateful for the reprieve. Boudreaux gently lifted the edge of his pant leg and inspected the prosthetic without a trace of mockery. "Retired?" she asked quietly. "Staff Sergeant Marcus Hayes. 8 years active duty, 1 in the reserve," he replied. She sighed, a sound not of frustration but of empathy. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that." Marcus smiled faintly. "It happens." She gestured toward the exit. "Go ahead, and don't let the idiots get to you." Marcus straightened his jacket, took a deep breath, and stepped back into the busy terminal. The corridor outside felt louder somehow, the chatter of other travelers filling the air like white noise, but Marcus was more aware than ever of the eyes that lingered a little too long on his leg. Most pretended not to see. A few whispered behind cupped hands, their words muffled but sharp as knives. The weight of their judgment was heavier than any physical burden, but Marcus had learned to carry invisible scars with grace. As he approached the shuttle to Terminal B, a man sitting nearby caught his eye. Grease under the man's fingernails, the worn fabric of his uniform, the weary slump of his shoulders. A ground crew member, no doubt. The man nodded toward Marcus's prosthetic leg and said quietly, "Navy. My dad lost his leg in Desert Storm. Respect to your service." Marcus's throat tightened. He nodded, understanding more than words could say. "Thank you." That simple exchange, a flicker of genuine connection, was a balm to the sting of the morning. Yet even as Marcus settled into his seat on the shuttle, the sting of Corbin's derision lingered in his mind like a shadow that refused to fade. Because the fight wasn't over. The terminal shuttle hummed softly as it glided toward Terminal B, the quiet murmur of early travelers filling the small space. Marcus settled into a window seat. The cool glass fogged slightly from the difference between inside and outside temperatures. He stretched his prosthetic leg cautiously, feeling the familiar ache beginning to set in. He had learned to live with the ache. A reminder that, although technology could replace flesh and bone, it could never quite erase the toll of war. Around him, the other passengers spoke in low voices, some absorbed in their phones, others lost in thought. Marcus remained quiet, eyes tracing the passing scenery outside. But even here in the relative solitude of the shuttle, the weight of the morning's encounters lingered heavily on his shoulders. He wasn't just carrying the physical load of his bag or the discomfort in his leg. He was carrying the invisible scars left by judgment, ignorance, and cruelty. It was in this moment, as the shuttle rolled to a gentle stop near Gate B12, that the tension of the morning began to ease, not because of the fading noise or the quiet hum of the airport, but because of a simple act. An act of recognition from someone who saw him not as a stereotype, but as a person. As Marcus rose to step off, a woman approached, calm, professional, and unassuming. Her name badge read Boudreaux. She moved with a confidence born of experience, the kind that doesn't demand attention but commands respect simply by being present. "I'm going to escort you through," she said quietly. There was no condescension in her tone, no hint of the mockery Marcus had endured earlier, just quiet, straightforward kindness. He nodded, grateful for the reprieve. Together they walked to a side corridor, away from the gaze of the crowd. Boudreaux led him into a small room. Sterile, yes, but quieter, less clinical than the harshness of the previous screening area. "Look," she began gently. "Some people forget what respect looks like. They see a prosthetic and think it's an invitation to joke, to mock. But that's ignorance, and ignorance is something I deal with every day." Marcus met her eyes, appreciating the sincerity. "I've been through worse. This is just another battle." She smiled, a knowing smile. "But battles like these wear you down, don't they?" Marcus hesitated, then nodded. "They do." Boudreaux reached out, adjusting the strap on his prosthetic with practiced ease. "I'm sorry you had to deal with Corbin. He's new and, well, some people never grow out of that." Marcus laughed softly, the sound more relieved than amused. "I've met people like him everywhere, on bases, in hospitals, sometimes even in my own unit." "That kind of attitude is a cancer," Boudreaux said firmly. "It eats away at everything that makes a community strong. But you carry more than most people will ever understand." The word struck a chord. Marcus had spent years bearing his pain beneath layers of duty and silence. Hearing someone acknowledge it, truly acknowledge it, was a balm to his weary spirit. For a moment, silence settled between them, comfortable and genuine. Boudreaux's gaze softened. "If it helps, know that you're not alone. There are more of us who see you, who respect you." Marcus's eyes scanned the room, then settled back on her. "Thank you, Boudreaux. More than I can say." She nodded, then opened the door, gesturing for him to follow. As they stepped back into the terminal, Marcus felt a shift. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it was there, a lightness, a reassurance that dignity could be reclaimed even in the most unlikely places. At gate B12, Marcus found a quiet corner away from the crowd. The morning rush was picking up, but for once, he felt a semblance of peace. He unzipped his canvas bag slowly, pulling out a granola bar, his makeshift fuel for the day. The simple act of eating was grounding, a reminder that despite everything, life went on. Nearby, a few travelers glanced over, some curious, others respectful. No whispers, no judgment. Marcus looked down at his prosthetic, the smooth black surface catching the light. It was a symbol of loss, yes, but also of survival, adaptation, and strength. He ran his fingers lightly over the carbon fiber. This leg had carried him through more than most could imagine. It had helped him walk away from war and toward a future he still hoped to build. Just then, a voice broke through his thoughts, a familiar, steady voice that carried a quiet authority. "Sergeant Hayes?" Marcus turned to see a man in a pilot's uniform approaching, his silver hair neatly trimmed, eyes sharp but kind. The weight of years in the air was evident in his posture, but so was a calm that comes from mastery of one's craft. "I'm Captain John Kravitz. I'll be flying your route today." Marcus stood, slightly stiff but standing tall. They shook hands, the firm grip of two men who understood what it meant to carry responsibility. Kravitz smiled warmly. "I heard about what happened at security. Sorry you had to deal with that nonsense." Marcus shrugged. "It's part of the day, I guess. Not if I have anything to say about it." Kravitz's tone was resolute. "Would you like to fly first class today?" The offer caught Marcus off guard. He blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. Before he could answer, Kravitz pulled a small notebook from his jacket and scribbled something quickly. He handed it to a nearby gate agent who typed swiftly, then printed a new boarding pass. "Row 2A, window seat. Enjoy." Marcus stared at the ticket, a strange mix of disbelief and gratitude washing over him. "You didn't have to do that." "I did. Some people need a reminder of what gratitude looks like." Marcus looked around the bustling gate area, catching the brief, curious glances of other travelers as they noticed his new seat assignment. For the first time that morning, he felt seen, not as a robot leg, not as an inconvenience, but as a man worthy of respect. Marcus felt the weight of the new boarding pass in his hand as if it carried more than just a seat assignment. Row 2A, window seat, first class. It was a world away from the back of the plane, the crowded cabin where he usually sat, surrounded by the noise and distractions of travelers who barely noticed the man with the prosthetic leg among them. As he moved toward the jet bridge, his footsteps echoed softly, the familiar click of his carbon fiber leg no longer just a sound of endurance, but a quiet declaration of strength and dignity. Passing by gate B9, he caught a glimpse of Corbin, the TSA agent from earlier, standing stiffly against the wall. Their eyes met briefly. Corbin's gaze dropped immediately, as if realizing the weight of what had just happened. No apology came, but Marcus saw something else, a flicker of recognition, perhaps shame. Boarding the plane, Marcus was greeted with warm smiles from the flight attendants, small gestures that spoke volumes. Their eyes held no pity, only genuine welcome. "Right this way, Sergeant Hayes," a stewardess said softly, guiding him toward his seat. The first-class cabin was spacious and quiet, a stark contrast to the cramped, noisy economy section he was used to. The leather seat was wide and comfortable, with ample legroom that allowed him to stretch without worry. He sank into the seat slowly, feeling the softness beneath him, the kind of comfort he hadn't expected this morning. Looking out the window, Marcus watched the airport fade into the distance as the plane taxied down the runway. The hum of the engines filled the cabin, a steady, comforting vibration beneath the whispered conversations and the occasional clink of glasses. Moments later, Captain Kravitz entered the aisle and took the seat beside him. There was an unspoken camaraderie between the two men, an understanding beyond words. "I've flown medevac missions in Desert Storm," Kravitz said quietly. "I've seen the things men carry, not just the wounds, but the memories, the burdens." Marcus nodded, feeling the weight of those words deep within. "It's not always the medals or the ceremonies that matter," Kravitz continued. "Sometimes it's a seat in first class, a moment of respect." Marcus smiled faintly. Thank you, Captain. That means more than you know. As the plane climbed into the sky, the clouds stretching out like a vast white sea beneath them, Marcus closed his eyes briefly, letting the hum of the engines lull him. Around him, the cabin was alive with activity. Business travelers typing away on laptops, families chatting quietly. But none of it reached him. He was somewhere else, in the dusty heat of Kandahar, on a night filled with explosions and silence, in the hospital rooms filled with pain and hope. But here above the clouds, with a simple act of kindness behind him, Marcus allowed himself a moment of peace. Later, as the flight attendant approached with a glass of water and a warm smile, Marcus looked up. "Please let us know if you need anything," she said. "I will, thank you," he replied softly. For the first time in a long time, Marcus felt seen, not as a casualty or a statistic, but as a man deserving of dignity and respect. The plane finally touched down in Atlanta. The soft thump of landing reverberated through the cabin, signaling the end of Marcus's journey, but in many ways only the beginning of a new chapter. As the passengers began to gather their belongings, Marcus remained seated for a moment longer, his hands resting on his worn canvas bag. Around him, the buzz of conversations rose and fell, phones lit up, and the rush to the exit grew palpable. But something had changed. In the faces around him, Marcus noticed whispers, curiosity, perhaps a touch of shame. Some passengers glanced at him with newfound respect, others with silent acknowledgement. A young boy, no older than 10, tugged gently on his mother's sleeve. "Mom," the boy whispered, eyes wide, "is that man a soldier? Does he have a robot leg?" The mother smiled softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. Marcus knelt down, careful with his prosthetic, and smiled at the boy. "Not a robot," he said gently, "just a helper. It reminds me where I've been." The boy nodded thoughtfully, chewing on the weight of those words. "Did it hurt?" he asked. Marcus chuckled softly. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but pain doesn't stop me. It just reminds me to keep moving forward." The mother's gaze met his, full of gratitude and awe. "Thank you," she whispered. As Marcus stood to leave, he realized that moments like these, small, honest, human, were worth more than any medal. Outside the terminal, the world spun on, often indifferent, sometimes cruel. But in the kindness of strangers, the recognition from a fellow veteran, the quiet respect of a captain who saw beyond the scars, Marcus found hope. Because dignity is not given, it is earned. Not just on battlefields, but in the eyes of those who choose to see us fully. And sometimes the biggest battles are fought not with weapons, but with moments of courage. The courage to respect, to acknowledge, and to love. Was Expert Insight, Why Recognition Matters. Dr. Elaine Matthews, a clinical psychologist specializing in veterans' mental health, explains, returning from war is not just a physical journey, but a deeply psychological one. Veterans like Marcus carry invisible wounds, trauma, loss, and often societal alienation. When their sacrifices are dismissed or mocked, it compounds their pain and hinders healing. Recognition, genuine respect and empathy, acts as a powerful antidote. It validates their experience, restores dignity, and can dramatically improve mental health outcomes. The story of Marcus illustrates this beautifully. The shift from ridicule to respect, from invisibility to acknowledgement, is transformative. Final, shocking truth: the cost of ignorance. Despite stories like Marcus's, countless veterans face daily discrimination, misunderstanding, and neglect. Many endure silent struggles in the shadows, unseen and unheard. The real tragedy is not the loss of a limb, but the loss of humanity that comes when society fails to honor those who gave everything. We must ask ourselves, how many Marcus Hayes walk among us, carrying burdens both visible and invisible, waiting for someone to see them, not as victims or curiosities, but as heroes deserving of dignity? If this story moves you, anger you, inspire you, or make you feel love, share it, because awareness is the first step toward change. Because respect isn't just a word, it's a lifeline.